Greetings, everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. We are back again with Pillars of Eternity, a classic cRPG from developer Obsidian Entertainment. We recently finished a live playthrough of this game, and I am finally ready to deliver a review. Quick FYI for those who are interested, I stream Mondays and Wednesdays starting at 10 p.m. Central Standard Time. There's also a live playlist that houses all of my previous streams. We are currently in the beginning of a live playthrough of this game's sequel, Pillars of Eternity 2, Deadfire. If you are interested in following it, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so you are notified when I am going live. With all that being said, let's dive into the review, starting with what I like. The writing in this game is absolutely phenomenal. It doesn't matter if you are dealing with the main quest, side quest, party member dialogue, or just reading some random book. It's all great stuff that keeps you glued to the screen. On top of that, this game is very mature in an adult way. When I say that, I mean some games are rated mature just because they throw around a bunch of cuss words, but if you took that out, most of the issues you encounter in the game feel like teenage drama. Pillars of Eternity is about adults who are experiencing complete despair in a way that is very relatable, and this grounds the dark fantasy world Obsidian draws you into. Most of this game is set in a nation called Deerwood that has been overrun with a hollow-born crisis. Children are being born hollow, meaning they have no souls, causing them to die in horrific ways or forcing the parents to put them down. A fantastic job is done of conveying the desperation everyone feels due to this hollow-born curse. Some are searching for others to blame and lash out with violence. Some have dedicated their lives to undoing the curse, no matter what the cost. And yet many more have given into hopelessness, convinced that these are the end times and continued survival is a pipe dream. You are thrown into the middle of this chaos because you are a watcher, someone who is capable of seeing other souls and interacting with them. Sometimes you can even directly enter the memories of a person who is already passed. This lets you gain information that is unavailable to everyone else around you. That's a fantastic setup because it establishes very early in the game why you are the only one who can solve this crisis. When starting a new game, you'll be able to select the difficulty, and I think Obsidian did a fantastic job here. A lot of games have different difficulty settings, but they feel like shades of each other, not wholly different experiences in combat. In Pillars of Eternity, easy is absolutely a cakewalk, and it's the difficulty that the game recommends you take if you are a new player. I love this because it pushes people who are new to these types of games towards an experience that will be more forgiving, as opposed to them just playing on normal and quitting the game because it's significantly more difficult than what they are used to. Normal is for people like me, who are used to this type of game, but play for story more than combat, so I'm not looking for a really difficult combat experience. Hard is for the more veteran players who are looking for a real challenge, and finally Path of the Damned is for players who want an experience that will feel flat out unfair. Any of these difficulties can be combined with Expert Mode, which removes a lot of the helper icons in your interface, and Trial of Iron, which limits you to only one save file. These options all feel distinctive, and I really appreciate the care that went into making sure players can have the exact type of difficulty experience they are looking for. After selecting your difficulty and viewing a brief screen, you can start on character customization. There is definitely one major omission here that we will talk about in a later section, but for now let's focus on what I loved, which is the wealth of options. There are 6 different races, and each of them have at least 2 sub-races that you can choose from. All of these options come with descriptions that flesh out the importance of your selection and how this character might fit into the game world. Once you have selected a race, you could choose one of 11 classes. All of the options are fantastic, and many of them have very satisfying reactivity in the game because during dialogue, you will oftentimes have options specifically because of the class that you have chosen. Playing as a Cypher can be a very different experience compared to a priest, both from a combat and a role-playing standpoint. After this, you choose your attributes, which will be a familiar screen for anybody who's played these types of games before, except for strength, which is changed to might, and it counts for martial, healing, and magic damage, which is an interesting change. After this, you choose both your culture and background, which once again will unlock multiple dialogue options throughout the game. Finally, you can select your voice and appearance. There are 8 options for male and female characters respectively, and there are mods to add additional options if that is your desire. Altogether, I think character creation is handled very well in this game and provides enough options to make a player feel like they are crafting their own unique character. Traveling with you throughout the adventure is a phenomenal cast of party members. There are 11 potential companions, 8 in the base game, and 3 more if you purchase the White March DLC that we'll talk about in a bit. Unlike most modern games, Pillars of Eternity let you use a team of up to 6 characters, and each companion has one of the 11 classes in the game. All of your companions can be respected at any time for a relatively modest amount of money. You cannot change their class, and they'll go back to the level they were at when you recruited them, but that still leaves a ton of room for customization. All of this makes it very easy to get the exact type of party that you want. In addition, there's a huge amount of different weapons, armor, and accessories you can pick up during your playthrough that will support a wide variety of builds in your party. There are no weight restrictions, and you get a personal chest so you can keep as many of these items as you like. You could go 20 hours in the game with Eder built for damage, and then all of a sudden decide you need him to be a pure tank, and it will be very easy for you to shift him into that type of role. Many games almost seem to punish you for switching playstyles, so I really appreciate this open system Obsidian implemented, and I think it's a shame more games haven't adopted it. The design of companions is also fantastic across the board. They each have their own backgrounds, cultures, personalities, and motivations. Oftentimes, their choice of class is a direct extension of who they are. I am a big fan of just about all of them, but in different ways. Eder is hilarious. Durance is obscene but insightful. Devil of Karak is deliciously evil, so on and so forth. Some of them develop unique relationships with other members of your party, and the banter between them is stellar throughout the game. There is one caveat to all of this, but we will get to that in a later section. I am a big fan of fully realized cities and games, and Obsidian has done a wonderful job of that with Defiance Bay. The city is split into 5 different sections, and all of them are chock full of personalities, quests, and lore. It feels like an achievement that was well worth your time once you are finally able to get past the city gates. Part of what makes the hub so appealing is the incredible world building within this game. Deerwood not only feels alive, it feels like the nation has centuries of history, much of it bloody due to political strife. This makes it much more interesting to walk around in hub areas and speak with significant figures who reveal more of the fascinating history, along with providing perspective on the issues of today. Pillars of Eternity has 2 DLCs that are actually one large story called The White March Part 1 and 2. They provide additional companions, weapons, armor, regions, quests, creatures, and difficult bosses to your campaign. My personal preference when it comes to DLCs is post-game expansions, but this is clearly a truckload of content and is a great value for players. Speaking of which, if you take into account the base game and both pieces of DLC, Pillars of Eternity will take you around 100 hours to fully complete. The last thing I want to mention I enjoyed is the fantastic soundtrack, which you have been listening to throughout this video. At this point, the Pillars of Eternity music is flat out iconic, and you know immediately when you are listening to it. Justin E. Bell composed the soundtrack for both Pillars games, and he did such a good job that even though he left the company and joined PlayStation Studios, they are still contracting him to do the soundtrack for Avowed. Just absolutely fantastic work that lifts up the game. There are 2 areas of the game I am neutral on, and the first is its Stronghold system. Early on, you will get access to a stronghold that you have to manage. By paying money, you can upgrade different parts of it, and that will give you access to special vendors and bonuses when you sleep there. Throughout the game, you will be visited by mercenaries, diplomats, vendors, or people who have specific quests they want help with. You get different options for how to resolve these quests based on what party members you have already recruited, and sometimes they can be assigned to assist in a particular venture. There are 2 quest lines that are directly related to your stronghold, and not only are both of them fantastic, but just as importantly, both of their final fights live up to the hype. All of this is great and makes having a stronghold fantastic. The problem is the visits from these different people are time-based, meaning you have a specific amount of days before that person will leave. never to be seen again. Sometimes there are penalties you incur for not meeting these people within the set deadline. Your stronghold can also be attacked while you are away. You have the option to auto-resolve these attacks or quickly return to deal with them. Auto-resolving the assaults usually results in a small gold penalty, but sometimes doing this will damage your stronghold and subsequently revert one or several upgrades you have made. There were multiple times in my playthrough where I had to interrupt what I was doing to meet with some random noble or resolve one of these invasions. I am not a fan of being forced to return to my stronghold due to these arbitrary visits. I would rather allow these tasks to stack up and then complete them at my leisure. The second aspect I am neutral on is combat. On the one hand, monsters are extremely varied, use different tactics, and consistently represent a challenge that holds your attention. Martial abilities and spells are animated in spectacular fashion, and they sound great as well. There are also no random encounters, so while there is a lot of combat, it's always in pursuit of a goal, whether you are clearing a dungeon or exploring a region. I appreciate all of that, and from this standpoint, combat is very enjoyable. Unfortunately, the AI system for your party members is absolutely terrible. You have the option in Pillars of Eternity to assign behaviors to your characters that will determine how they handle combat encounters. The issue is the behaviors don't scale as you level up. Classes like ciphers that have a resource pool to be managed will just repeatedly spam low-level abilities as soon as they have reached the proper threshold. Classes like wizards that have access to their full resources but get limited slots will blow through all of their spells in a couple of battles. I basically had to limit the AI to auto-attack for my entire team. This forces the player to engage in a large amount of micromanagement during fights. Now, I know there are some people who hear that and believe it's the way games should work. I believe one of my live viewers made the comment that you shouldn't want the game to play itself for you. I completely disagree with this and absolutely prefer games that let me set up detailed behaviors and tactics, so when combat starts, I can just let my well-oiled machine go crazy. If you prefer to manually operate all 6 characters, that's perfectly fine, but I still think it's a weakness that the game doesn't allow for a different playstyle. Quick note before we get into what I didn't like about the game. If you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate you subscribing and hitting the like button. This information tells me which content the community is enjoying and helps my videos spread to more people. I really appreciate all of the support. My first issue with the game is there's no multi-classing option whatsoever. Honestly, it feels weird to say that because I am not a huge fan of multi-classing, but playing this game revealed for me that I might not use it, but I miss it if it's not there. The complete lack of an ability to mix together different classes is a very glaring omission, and one of the many things Obsidian improved upon in the sequel to this game. Another issue is there's not nearly enough information about the mechanics, and I don't think the tutorial really sets you up for success if you are not already used to this type of game. This issue is not uncommon for cRPGs, but most of those games are based on a system that already has a wealth of information, such as Baldur's Gate, which is based on D&D, so even if you felt the game didn't thoroughly explain something, you could usually figure it out based on other information sources or your own experiences with the tabletop. Pillar's combat system is unique from the ground up, so if you don't understand how the mechanics work based on the information provided by the game, then you are pretty much stuck. This is less of an issue now since the game has been out for so long and there are many fan-created guides that can help fill the gaps. Still, I think players who are new to this type of game and aren't willing to read outside materials to understand it will probably find Pillars of Eternity a little unwelcoming. On that same subject, I think the first hour of this game is mediocre and potentially a huge turnoff for new players. It's basically a giant lore dump with a little bit of combat sprinkled in, and for many people it's almost certainly too much too soon. As I mentioned before, the world building is incredible, so over time you will become familiar with certain terms and the lore will make sense, but it's not introduced in a welcoming fashion. Traps and locks are scaled very poorly in the early game. Mechanics is a skill that lets you pick up traps and open locked doors or chests. If you don't specialize in this skill, you'll probably end up using a party member with decent ranks in that area. In most games, as long as you are increasing your lockpicking skill at every level up and you stick to areas areas that are within your level, picking up traps and opening locks should be no problem. That's definitely not the case in Pillars of Eternity, and I experienced countless situations in the early game where there was no choice but to send my tank running over a trap because Durance flat out couldn't pick it up no matter what scrolls or drugs I used. I've seen a few posts recommending that you use a rogue mercenary for the first 20 hours or so to help cover for this, and I absolutely hate that idea. I never use mercs in a game that provides real party members with backgrounds and dialogues, so it's unfortunate that mechanics is scaled in a way where this is something you really should consider. The voice acting for your party members and NPCs that you meet pops in and out at completely random times, and it's honestly jarring. In a game like Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, there's a very limited amount of voice acting, but it's provided to you in blocks, usually for a scene that has very important story moments. In Pillars, what lines are or are not voice acted is a complete roll of the dice, so 2 lines will have a voice and all of a sudden the third one doesn't. Even worse, sometimes for whatever reason, the voice acting is delayed, so you'll start reading thinking that a voice is not going to come on, and then all of a sudden the person will start speaking. It all comes off as choppy and takes away from how fantastic the writing is. The game has different factions that you can align yourself with as part of the main story. It's cool that they are there, and the faction related quests are really awesome as well. Unfortunately, it's extremely easy to accidentally align yourself with a faction you didn't intend to join. The game doesn't have any sort of hard stop that makes it clear doing this quest will lock you in with a particular group. I went into my second playthrough knowing this and still somehow trapped myself in a partnership with the Dozens, a group that I absolutely cannot stand. It would have been nice if the game put up clearer roadblocks to help ensure you can stick with the faction you actually want to join. Finally, there are no romance options in Pillars of Eternity, and in my opinion, it's another glaring omission. Eder is obviously a strong option for a female romance, while my playthrough as a cipher has me convinced that Grieving Mother is the canon love of the Watcher's life. There is so much effort put into making your party members deep and interesting that it seems strange you are not given the option to develop closer relationships with them. That wraps up my review of Pillars of Eternity. Again, this game is an absolute undeniable classic and should be played by anyone who is a deep fan of engaging stories, well-developed lore, and unique combat mechanics. One more time, for those of you who are interested in watching me progress through the sequel, I stream Mondays and Wednesdays starting at 10 p.m. Central Standard Time. Make sure you are subscribed and hit the bell so you are notified when I am going live. Hope all of you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave me a like, share this content, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I will see you all in the next video. Take care.